At 3:14 a.m., a single bank notification turned my marriage into a crime scene. And when I confronted my husband, he didn't just lie, he tried to erase me. The email notification pinged on my phone at 3:14 a.m., a soft, crystalline sound that felt like a gunshot in the silence of our master bedroom. Mark was snoring beside me, a rhythmic, satisfied sound that usually brought me comfort. Tonight, it made my skin crawl. I rolled over, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face as I unlocked my banking app. There it was, transfer out $45,000. My heart didn't just skip a beat, it plummeted into a cold, hollow space in my stomach. That money was my end-of-year bonus, the reward for 18 months of brutal 80-hour work weeks at the firm. It was supposed to be our down payment for the lake house we'd talked about for years, the one with the wraparound porch and the view that made Mark stop complaining about his own stressful career for 5 minutes. I checked the memo line, business operating expenses. I stared at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in. Mark's company, a boutique marketing agency, had been struggling for months, but he had sworn to me over dinner just last week that they were turning a corner. He had looked me in the eyes, those same eyes that used to make me feel like the only woman in the world, and lied. He had stolen the money without asking, without a conversation, treating my sweat and late nights like his personal petty cash fund. I felt the heat rising in my chest, not of anger, but of a terrifying, sharp clarity. I looked over at him, his mouth slightly open, sleeping the sleep of the entitled. I reached out, my fingers hovering just inches from his face, and realized that the man lying next to me wasn't a partner anymore. He was a parasite, and I knew exactly how to starve him out. I slipped out of bed, my feet silent on the hardwood, and retreated to the home office. I sat in his leather chair, the leather still warm from his earlier work session, and opened his laptop. He was sloppy. He never logged out, and he certainly didn't think I had the technical acumen to bypass his rudimentary security. I pulled up the company's internal ledger, and within 10 minutes, the picture became clear. It wasn't just my bonus. He had been bleeding our joint savings for months, funneling money into a shell account under a name I didn't recognize. But as I dug deeper, deeper than he ever thought I would go, I found something else. I found the emails. They weren't about business. They were about a luxury condo downtown, a lease signed in his name and hers, the woman who had been his executive assistant for the last 2 years. I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosting over the evidence of his betrayal, when suddenly, the laptop screen flickered and a message popped up. Remote access detected. Admin privileges revoked. My breath hitched. I hadn't even touched the security settings yet. I looked at the door, then back at the screen as a new window opened. It was a live feed of the office security camera, but it wasn't showing the office I was sitting in. It was showing a dark, dimly lit room filled with servers. Someone was watching me. And then, the cursor began to move on its own, typing a single, taunting sentence into the search bar. "I see you, Elena. Should I start the deletion process, or do you want to tell him yourself?" My blood turned to ice. The cursor blinked rhythmically, a digital heartbeat that mocked my paralysis. "I see you, Elena." I didn't know how they were watching. Maybe a back door he'd installed on his own network, or perhaps this mystery person had been tracking the firm for a long time. My first instinct was to slam the laptop shut, but I knew that would only trigger whatever deletion process they were threatening. I sat perfectly still, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, my reflection in the dark screen looking like a stranger, pale, wide-eyed, and desperate. I typed back, my hands trembling so violently I hit the wrong keys twice. "Who is this?" The cursor didn't hesitate. It moved with a fluid, predatory grace. "Someone who knows your husband is bankrupting you to pay for a life you aren't part of. You want the files? You want the proof to sink him? Come to the server room in the basement of his firm. Now. The audacity of the request made me nauseous. If I left the house, Mark might wake up and realize I was gone. But he was currently dead to the world, exhausted from a night of working. The house felt like a cage, and the truth about his mistress, the downtown condo, the stolen bonus, was a fire burning under my skin. I grabbed my coat, leaving my phone on the desk so he couldn't track my location if he checked his synced accounts. I slipped out the front door, the night air hitting me like a physical blow. The drive to his office was a blur of neon streetlights and reckless speed. I didn't care about the red lights. I didn't care about the law. I cared about the destruction of the man who thought I was just a paycheck to be harvested. The building was a monolith of steel and glass, looming over the city like a tombstone. I had a spare key, one he'd given me years ago, back when we were a team, back when we built things instead of breaking them. The lobby was silent, the security guard station empty. I took the elevator to the basement, the floor numbers ticking down like a countdown to an explosion. When the doors slid open, the smell hit me. Ozone, heated plastic, and old paper. The server room was a labyrinth of humming black towers and blinking status lights. I walked into the maze, calling out, "I'm here!" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the mechanical drone. I turned a corner, expecting to see a hacker or a rival, but the room was empty. That is, until I saw it. A desk in the center of the aisle was covered in printed documents. Bank statements, flight itineraries, and photos. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. The top photo wasn't of Mark and his mistress. It was a photo of me, taken from across the street yesterday, looking tired and defeated at the firm. I looked up, scanning the dark corners of the room for a camera, when I heard the distinct, metallic click of a door locking behind me. I spun around, my pulse racing, and saw a shadow detach itself from the wall near the exit. It wasn't a hacker. It was Mark, holding my phone in his hand, his face twisted into a mask of cold, unbridled fury. He didn't look like a failing businessman. He looked like a man who had been waiting for the trap to snap shut. "You were never supposed to find the ledger, Elena," he whispered, his voice dangerously calm. "And you were definitely never supposed to see what I've planned for you now." He tapped a button on my phone, and a siren began to wail throughout the building, the sound of a silent alarm being triggered, but not for intruders. It was a fire alarm, and as smoke began to pour from the ceiling vents, I realized he hadn't locked me in to talk. He had locked me in to erase me. The high-pitched wail of the alarm vibrated in my teeth, a dissonant, screeching symphony of impending death. The sprinklers hadn't triggered yet, but the gray, acrid haze was already thickening, swirling around the server racks like a shroud. Mark stood on the other side of the heavy, glass-paneled partition, his silhouette distorted by the flickering red emergency lights. He wasn't running. He was watching. He was timing it. "Mark, unlock the door!" I screamed, slamming my palms against the reinforced glass. "You think this makes it go away? You think murdering your wife fixes your bankruptcy?" He laughed, a short, jagged sound that was swallowed by the blaring sirens. He held up his own phone, and the screen glowed with the familiar interface of our home security system. "I've already initiated the fire protocols, Elena. In 3 minutes, the oxygen suppression system kicks in. It'll suck the air out of this room so fast your lungs will collapse before you even realize you're dying. And the best part? The system will log this as an accidental electrical fire caused by your unauthorized access to the mainframe." He was insane. All these years, the man I'd shared a bed with had been a stranger wearing a skin suit of normalcy, hiding a bottomless well of sociopathic greed. My hands scrambled over the keypad by the door, but it was dead. He'd fried the circuitry remotely. I looked at the stacks of paper on the desk, the evidence of his double life, and realized with a sickening jolt that he hadn't just lured me here to kill me. He had lured me here to destroy the evidence while disposing of the one person who could testify against him. I scanned the room, my vision blurring as the smoke thickened, burning my eyes and throat. There was no window, no secondary exit. The server racks formed a cage of heat and circuitry. But then, I saw it. The manual override lever for the halon gas system hidden behind a loose floor panel. If I could trigger the emergency purge, it might blast the pressurized door outward, or at the very least disrupt the locking mechanism. I dove for the floor, my fingers tearing at the metal tile. My fingernails snapped, blood slicking the surface, but I found the latch. I pulled. A violent hiss erupted, not from the floor but from the vents above. The halon gas, the oxygen suppression system, began to scream into the room. It was white, freezing, and blinding. The temperature plummeted instantly, turning the air into a biting, toxic fog. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled into a pinpoint of gray light. I collapsed against the base of the server, gasping for air that wasn't there. Mark was still there, his face pressed against the glass, his expression one of bored anticipation, as if he were watching a movie. My strength was failing, my consciousness drifting away like a ship unmoored. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the small, heavy object I'd grabbed from his nightstand before leaving the house. His hardware wallet, the one that held the encryption keys to all his offshore accounts. I had swiped it on a whim, a desperate hope for leverage, not knowing how vital it would become. With my final ounce of strength, I pulled it out and held it up to the glass. Mark's eyes widened. He pounded on the door, his composure finally shattering. He didn't care about the fire anymore. He cared about the only thing he actually loved. I forced a jagged, breathless smile, my lips turning blue. I looked him dead in the eye, raised my other hand, and smashed the corner of the hardware wallet against the glass. It didn't break the glass, but the impact sent a spark, and the device, damaged and leaking its own lithium battery, began to sizzle with an intense blue-white light. I didn't stop. I jammed the sparking, electrified device into the internal wiring panel I'd ripped from the wall. The entire room erupted in a blinding surge of feedback, the servers screaming as they were fried from the inside out, and the door lock groaned, the bolts snapping with the sound of a gunshot. The door swung open just a fraction, and someone's hand reached in from the other side, grabbing my hair and yanking me out into the hallway. The grip on my hair was brutal, a frantic, desperate yank that hauled me out of the freezing, oxygen-deprived haze of the server room and onto the cold concrete of the hallway. I collapsed, gasping, my lungs burning as they fought to process the oxygen-rich air of the corridor. As I fought to regain my focus, I looked up to see who had pulled me out. It wasn't a hero. It was Sarah, Mark's executive assistant. Her face was pale, her eyes darting between me and the smoldering ruins of the server room, where Mark was now frantic, batting at the sparks with his suit jacket, screaming incoherently about his lost data. "Get up," she hissed, her voice trembling. "He's going to kill us both now. The encryption is gone, Alina. You fried the master keys. He's bankrupt and he knows it." I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking like newborn deer. Mark had finally noticed us. He turned, his face a mask of primal, unhinged rage. He lunged for us, but the building groaned. The sheer volume of electronics I'd shorted had triggered a cascading power failure that went beyond just the server room. The ceiling lights flickered and died, and the emergency fire suppression system finally went into full, blind panic, dousing the hallway in a deluge of chemical foam. Mark slipped, his polished shoes finding no purchase on the slick, expanding foam. He crashed into a rack, and I saw his phone, the source of his power and his control, skitter across the floor and slide into the open, burning wreck of the mainframe. He scrambled after it, but the structural integrity of the room, compromised by the heat and the electrical surge, gave way. A ceiling panel groaned and collapsed, burying the door to the server room in a heap of twisted metal and drywall. Mark was trapped on the other side, clawing at the debris, howling like a wounded animal as his digital life, his stolen money, and his reputation burned in the fire I had ignited. Sarah turned to me, her eyes hollow. "He promised me a new life, Elena. He told me he was leaving you for me. But I saw the accounts yesterday. I saw that he wasn't paying me. He was using my identity for his shell companies. If he goes down, he's taking me with him. I have the files he thought he'd deleted from the home office. I copied them to the cloud before you even arrived." The realization hit me harder than the smoke. We weren't enemies. We were both just victims of the same man's sociopathy. "Call the police," I said, my voice finally finding its edge. "Tell them exactly what he did. Tell them about the arson, the fraud, and the attempted murder. If you want a clean slate, this is your only path." The sirens began to wail in the distance, a sound that shifted from a threat to a promise. As the first responders breached the lobby doors, I walked toward the building's exit, leaving the chaos behind. I didn't look back at the room where Mark was trapped, screaming my name. I didn't care if he survived the night. I had taken his business, his money, and his future. But more importantly, I had reclaimed the woman I used to be. 2 weeks later, the news cycle was feeding on the carcass of Mark's agency. His shell companies were dismantled, his assets were frozen, and he was sitting in a holding cell waiting for a trial that would bury him for decades. I sat in a lawyer's office, watching the morning sun hit the lake outside the window. The house wasn't the one he'd promised, but it was mine, bought with the remnants of my own savings and the settlement from the firm's insurance payout. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was just a photo, a screenshot of a bank transfer receipt. It was the full amount of my bonus, plus interest, returned to my account from a donated shell company entity. Below it, a single line of text. "I'm sorry. I hope you find what you're looking for." I set the phone down on the table, watched the light dance across the surface of the water, and finally, for the first time in years, I began to breathe. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally, mercifully, free.